Honde Onde Mtsan. This is Thongya, a podcast by the District 7 Legislative Office. We hope you are well this spring, where new beginnings blossom and the earth renews its growth. So I trust you all had a joyful and reflective Easter holiday, and I pray that you were surrounded by those that you love, and hopefully your spirit is nurtured, and we are upheld our traditions this spring. So I really enjoy all the dances and celebrations going on in our Kiowa community and in our surrounding communities. This year, on April 1st and 2nd, we had our Oklahoma Native American Youth Language Fair, in which our Kiowa tribe and our Kiowa language was well represented by our Kiowa Language Department, and our high schools from Weatherford, Anadarko, Carnegie, and Riverside Indian School were all there to present in our language. So congratulations to all those winners. It was awe-inspiring to see these young people speaking our language, picking it up. So we now, with the new life happening all around us, our gaze turns towards the stewardship of our responsibilities as legislators. This newsletter hopefully bears the fruit of our diligent labor to give you a comprehensive update. In the recent KIC meeting, we discussed strides that were taken to kind of move the tribe forward as we face plans for more transparency and lining our values up with a strategic plan. I've included in this newsletter, the newsletter that's going to be put out on our website, a little bit about the modifications for our current fiscal year 23-24, and then the new approval process for our annual budget, fiscal year 2024 and 25. And our legislature combined its efforts with the executive branch and the finance department in order to set a foundation for what that budget looks like. And so our executive branch published a handbook, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Hopefully you're able to read into that and understand it. So I want to just welcome you to our most recent episode of this podcast, and as we continue to try and communicate with our citizens that live in District 7. So we wish you a great and happy spring season. We talk about renewal. As Kiowa people, we celebrate the first thunder, and they say that first thunder is not just a simple thunder. It should be a crack of thunder with a long rolling after you hear that crack, and that says that's the first thunder. For Kiowa people, it's a renewal. It means, we're going to look forward to gathering for our annual Sundance. Well, we don't have our Sundance anymore, but we have our Thampega ceremony that happens around the 4th of July. When I hear that thunder, for me, it means get your camping stuff ready. Get your teepee pole. Maybe you need to make new stakes, or check your ropes on your arbor or your wall tent and cut new arbor poles. But we're getting ready to camp together and celebrate who we are as Kiowa people. And I think that's what First Thunder means to me, is a renewal, and start getting ready for our annual ceremonies coming up in the summer. For Kiowa people, we were summer people. We would get restless. We wanted to go out there and hunt buffalo and go across the prairie and camp and see our relatives. So that's what I think about when you hear the first thunder. And so first thunder has happened with the spring, and a lot of prayers are going up in our different Kiowa communities. But we also have a lot of Kiowa families that are in mourning today. My heart goes out to the Kozad family, who had a tragic death in their family. I keep them in prayer each and every day for this past week, and I'm grieving right alongside them. So I'd like to dedicate a song to them today. While they're in mourning, we don't understand why tragic things like this happen within our families, and sometimes it calls them to question our faith in Dawk-E or Dawk-A. But we need to keep steadfast in our faith. This is when we all need one another, and we need prayer, and we need song and ceremony. And so part of this podcast is a little bit of our identity as Kiowa people. So I'd like to dedicate a song to my niece. She's now going to be an angel, and I think about her life and how kind and loving she was to her family, and I think I found myself questioning and asking why, Doc, would he take this young person from our life, and he wanted her more than we did. He wanted her to be an angel in heaven, and sometimes we ask, well, we're not ready for that person to leave, but she's got a reward now. She's going to be an angel and wear a crown in heaven. So this song talks about, I'm going to work for God, and when my work is finished, I'm going to be rewarded with a golden crown. So that's this song I'd like to dedicate to my niece, Michaela Kozad. Doc ite da sa te da pop, doc ite bagit sa te pai de, haloi get sa te pot de tona, doc ito da sa te bonamo. Aol gubo hondot se tono, haon baba haon tadado, doc ite da sate da pop, doc ite bagit sa de pai de, haloi get sa de pot de tono, doc ito da sa de bonamo. Haol gubohon dot se tono, hao baba haon tadado, doc ite da sa te da pop, doc ite bagit sa de pai de, haloi get sa te pot de tona, doc ito da sa te bonama. Ao gubo hondot se tona, haon baba haon tadado, doc ite da sa te da pop, doc ite da sa toi de pai de, haloi get sa te to de tono, doc ito da sa te ponamo. Hao gubohon dot se tono, haloi baba haon tadado. Amen. Our next update will be for the Kiowa Indian Council meeting. We want to give everybody a summary on what transpired on April the 6th. In the last assembly of the Kiowa Indian Council, there were some strides taken to affect the tribe's governance and membership criteria. The all-day meeting was held on Saturday, April the 6th, and it had a quorum for the entire meeting. So the headlining of the meeting was the election of Steve Geronimo Hopkins as the Kiowa Indian Council coordinator, and there were two pivotal resolutions from 2023 that were voted upon. So the council saw the election of Mr. Hopkins. Mr. Hopkins, who told us about his experience and his vision as the Kiowa Indian Council, and he garnered enough support and is expected to bring new perspectives and oversee key initiatives aligning with the tribe's long-term goals. The two central resolutions that were discussed from 2023 were a constitutional amendment. This This resolution proposed an amendment to the Kiowa Constitution that clarifies the requisite number of votes necessary to amend the Constitution. The Kiowa Indian Council consented to the stipulation that at least 30% of eligible voters must participate in the amendment process to ratify any changes. That is a change. The current Constitution states 30% of voters, so this clarifies now that it must be 30% of eligible voters must participate in the amendment process to ratify changes to the Constitution. The second resolution was the blood quantum resolution that was proposed by Kyle Tattlety. The second resolution addressed the criteria for tribal membership, focusing on blood quantum requirements. The specific details of this resolution were discussed and agreed upon, marking a significant change in how tribal membership eligibility will be determined in the future. It was voted upon to make current tribal citizens increase their blood quantum to 4/4 Kiowa. There are a lot of questions and a lot of procedures that will have to be labeled out, but first, that's got to be put before, both of these resolutions have to be put before a vote before the people. And so there will be a special election to talk about these resolutions and get the approval of the entire tribe. There's a lot of business from 2024 that will need to be followed up on. So there is a necessity for a follow-up meeting. The breadth of discussions and the complexity of issues that were presented in the Kiowa Indian Council's agenda made it clear that further dialogue is always needed. A special follow-up meeting has to be scheduled to flesh out the implementation of newly approved measures and act on additional items that still need to be fully addressed. So stay tuned to this podcast and to our website, kiowatribe.org, for updates as the Kiowa Indian Council continues to show its dedication in protecting the welfare of tribal citizens. The Kiowa Indian Council also has an active website on the kiowatribe.org website. You can go there and read the minutes and see the resolutions that were presented and passed. And we invite you to do so. So we ask that the Kiowa community keep on checking our website for further updates and outcomes as the special meeting is planned out. And then the other update is on April 6th, the Kiowa Indian Council were presented with a roadmap of our financial roadmap for our Kiowa tribe for the upcoming year 2024-2025. Currently, there are two distinct fiscal matters the Kiowa people are asked to vote upon: the budget modification and an annual budget approval. So the difference between these two is at the core of this election process lies a fundamental question: how will the Kiowa citizens allocate its resources to pave a way for a prosperous future? Before answering this question, we must distinguish between which items are on these votes and how these votes will be cast. First and foremost, the budget modification, it encompasses changes, adjustments, and reallocations for of our current fiscal year's budget, which is 2023-2024. Whether responding to unforeseen expenses or redistributing surplus funds, the revision is an optimization tool to ensure that the Kiowa citizens understand the immediate needs and how we're effectively meeting those needs. The polls for this upcoming budget modification will be open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday, May the 4th. If you get your ballots mailed to you, those ballots should have been mailed out on April the 1st. So send your ballot in. That's for the current 2023-2024 year, and they are working to send out the other election notices for the 2024-2025 annual budget approval before the people. And also, as your District 7 legislator, I need to let you all know, I think there was only one that ran for District 7, and that's me. So please send in your ballot. I think that's going to happen on June the 1st. So this second action is the approval of the annual budget. It's an annual vote, and it's about setting forth our financial goals and priorities for the upcoming year. It's essentially a blueprint that guides our tribe's spending, investment, and savings, and is a reflection of our aspirations and long-term commitments. Both decisions, the modification and the annual budget approval, require thorough consideration and an understanding of their long-term implications. This year was the first time we've ever had a booklet that went over the budget. So there is a booklet available. I think it's posted to our website, but if you want a copy, we have copies in our District 7 offices for you to kind of peruse through, and it's meant to help you understand and be transparent with what our spending looks like for the upcoming year's budget. This document was introduced at the Kiowa Indian Council meeting, but offers a more comprehensive view of our proposed financial plans. The legislative branch passed a bill last year called the Budget Transparency Act, and we've worked diligently with the Finance Department and the Executive Branch to help increase transparency and sufficiency of information. So this booklet is not perfect. It is a starting point. We hope to start a foundation upon which more informed decisions can be made. And while it's acknowledged that its contents may not be immaculate, the budget represents a commitment to collective responsibility and progress. Just to let every citizen know, they may still request a full, detailed line item budget from the executive branch if they reach out to the executive branch's offices in Carnegie. So every vote matters in this upcoming election. It's not merely a formal approval, but an active contribution to the welfare and success of the Kiowa people. As the Kiowa Indian Council prepares each and every year for its meeting, each member is always encouraged to reflect upon our community values, our needs, and our prospects. The decisions which will be made on June the 1st and are going to be made on May 4th are all a collective step forward to a vision for the future, one that we hope encompasses prosperity, sustainability, and reverence for the shared traditions and ambitions of the Kiowa people. I firmly believe that together we can work to increase the transparency and accountability within our tribe. And this budget process is a step forward to mapping out our roadmap through the financial frontier. And this responsibility carries the promise and potential of great outcomes if done right. And so it's an opportunity for every citizen to get involved, get engaged, and to manifest the enduring strength and spirit of our Kiowa people through a more astute financial stewardship. Today we are joined by esteemed advocates of the Kiowa Language, Mr. Dane Poolaw of the OU Kiowa Language program in the Native Nations Center, Native American Studies Department at OU, and also Ramon Granado. And I'll let them introduce themselves, but Ramon comes to us from the Kiowa Language Department located in Anadarko, Oklahoma. A heartfelt welcome to our guest who work tirelessly to keep the rich heritage of our language alive. This session promises to be an illuminating session as we explore the future of our Kiowa language and evolving initiatives shaping its learning and teaching. So I'd like to begin with some introductions and welcome. We'll start with Mr. Dane Poolaw. Dane, if you tell us a little bit about yourself, what inspired you to work in language, and then where you work at now and how you've been involved with language preservation.
Cool. Dane Poolaw no do. Go don't get my team key. I go con. No University of Oklahoma get sorted the go to my team key do. No Anadarko High School get a group young group pack go University of Oklahoma get young group pack go 2010 young group pack OU. My name is Dane Poolaw. My Kiowa name is Kiowa Language Teaching Man. Anadarko Kia, so I grew up in Anadarko, Oklahoma. I went to school there. That's where I finished my high school degree, and then in 2010 I finished my degree here in Native American Studies at the University of Oklahoma. And I work at the University of Oklahoma. I am a Kiowa language teacher here, and I've been working here since 2007.
Ramon Akon go kutohin talia koekon. Carnegie kia kil go fry bread flats kia kia. Let's see. Carnegie kia Queton get motemo. So my name is Ramon Granado. Eagle Boy is my Kiowa name. I live in Carnegie, and that's also where I teach at the Carnegie High School, a Kiowa class for grades 9th through 12th, as well as some stuff that we do with the middle school, as well as the elementary school students. We have little outreaches in the mornings scheduled throughout the week. And just started, grew up around my grandma, kind of her speaking, and then from there, whenever after she passed away, unfortunately, in 2018, is when I began to learn more. Whenever I attended a Kiowa class in Tulsa, and since then, it's kind of been just a steady stream of continued learning, and just thankful to be where I am now. Kind of surreal being growing up, going to Carnegie schools, and then ended up being a teacher there. It's kind of one thing I never pictured, but it's wonderful to be there as a Kiowa language teacher. So,
Honde batsan. No I comp Yako to high get shande, but I'm still learning. But I'm glad y'all are here. I want to just thank you both for joining us, and it's going to be a good discussion and dialogue. That's what this podcast is geared towards. To have you share your insights on the work that you're doing. Before we go any further, though, my co-host for this podcast, Dr. Jerry Bread's here with us, and we're going to talk about language here, Dr. Bread. I'd like to hand the mic over to you and kind of expand upon the topic, maybe share a little bit and lead us into the conversation. I'll let you have the first question for our guests.
Thank you very much, Warren. I appreciate, as always, getting together and visiting with the younger people. It's kind of ironic. These three musketeers here speak Kiowa, and this old man doesn't speak it that fluently, which takes me to an issue that I have, and that's the question why we don't. Older folks, especially baby boomers. I think there's some terms that come into play that we'll talk about, and as it relates to y'all's teaching the language, some other areas. I'm a member of the Kiowa tribe. I'm also very proud ancestry with Cherokee Nation. So I got a little bit of each, 20 years out there in the Tahlequah area, and then 50 years around our people back here in this area. So ask me about Kiowas, I tell you. Ask me about Cherokees, I tell you. Otherwise, I don't know anything about the other Indians. But it's a pleasure to meet you guys and have y'all here with us to talk about this very, very critical situation for us. Jacob Sotai, who's a relative but also our vice chairman, and I were talking one day, and he asked me, what do you think is the most critical thing for us as Kiowa people to maintain our identity, our culture, our Bible? And I thought about it a while in my governance thinking, some of my academic work. I said land base. We got to have our land base still. And he said, you know what I think about? I said, well, tell me about it. He said, well, I think it's our language. He said, I think we got to keep our language alive. And I said, how do we do that? How do we keep this language alive when so many people have lost it over the past 100 years, et cetera? So these are some of the questions, points, comments that I want to integrate into our conversation today. Let y'all think a little bit about what we can do for the future of attaining, maintaining, retaining, obtaining our language. I think I know what we can do for our land base, and it takes a lot of legalities here, but just rambling on about what my focus is here with y'all today. It's a pleasure to meet y'all. This is the first time I've been back up here in 7 years. I retired here at OU in 1917. So 2017, and this is the first time I've been back up here in 7 years to visit up here. One more comment. I think it's important that you're comfortable, you relax. And when we Kiowas get relaxed, we get loud. We use a lot of our humor. We use a lot of our tools of ice breaking, as culturally speaking. So excuse us if we get a little bit carried away with that today on the podcast. I think it should be fun for everybody, but we're very serious people in what we're talking about. So hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Thank you.
What does the future look like for our Kiowa language and the work that you're doing? What do you see the future of our Kiowa language going forward?
So when I think about the future of our Kiowa language, I have to look at the past and the present of where we are right now. So currently, we got less than 10 very fluent speakers of various degrees. There are people that do partially speak, maybe about 50 to 100 that can hold on some conversation, plus some younger people nowadays are starting to be a little bit more conversant on kind of a base scale. So where we're at, I believe, with all of the work that we've come across, and that goes back to works of the late Reverend David Palti, the late Parker McKenzie, the late Alicia Kiyabon Gonzalez, and many others that have worked on our Kiowa language in the past. They've left a lot for us, and when I compare it to other tribes, including my other tribes that I am, Delaware and Choctaw, sometimes when it comes to everything that was written down and recorded, Kiowas tend to have a lot more than a lot of other tribes. So that is a positive for us because we have a lot to go by. And for right now, the most important thing is to get what we can record and ask and get any information we can get from our speakers now before they're gone too. And we got a lot that are willing to share with us and teach us in these days. And so I know my goal, and a lot of us who are teachers or just learning Kiowa are trying to get Kiowa as close to the way that people did speak it back then, as close as we can, with some newer modifications that will be coming in the future when we have nobody left to ask. So I think, to me, I feel like we're going in the way where we're going to be more conversant again. May not be exactly like how people conversed long ago, but we're trying to stick as much to it as possible while we can, and eventually it'll kind of evolve along the way. So I think we're kind of on at least a positive path to learn more and bring spoken Kiowa back into regular use.
As far as the future that I can see for us, I would say I absolutely agree with everything that Dana said, as well as things that have been documented very well, especially the hopeful goal to really tap into the Parker McKenzie collection as well. And where there's more written Kiowa, I've been getting to understand things on how being able to read in another language helps you improve a lot more, adds to your vocabulary, and you're better able to understand, and you're able to speak a lot clearer or make better sentences. And so like I said, with the future, a lot of it does depend on that work. I think there's also a hymn that's kind of sung that says there's plenty of work to do. Even though it's talking about God's work, with language work, there's definitely a lot to do. And I'm really excited to see a lot of even just the recent impact of the language classes, of things in high school where there's a stronger growing interest to learn more, to speak more. And we're really hoping that also, possibly even brings up more linguists. And I think, Dane got to put together a workshop a couple weeks ago here at OU. And one of the things that was brought up was about tribes needing to have linguists, just to be able to do that work as well. And thankfully, we have a lot from Parker McKenzie, as well as his great-grandson, Dr. Andrew McKenzie, over at University of Kansas. And I think it would just be helpful if not only the general population learning, or even students trying to academically learn, but even using that to help the language program or help the tribe in general, whether it be transcription, especially with a lot of the recordings that we have, either in the Western history collections or even the possibility of private collections from the Kiowa community itself. And basically with all this, with that growing interest as well as the community learning, students learning, one thing that I've been able to hear about in Carnegie as well, I had a student that was working at Georgia's, and and I think she was serving a Kiowa gentleman, and he happened to say a couple of words to her, and she turned around and responded to him in Kiowa, and he was surprised at the fact that this girl that wasn't Kiowa was speaking to him, but he was also glad that she was learning. And I think there needs to be a realm of students learning as well as the community, because students mostly will just speak in the classroom setting, but as long as there's more opportunity to speak outside of the classroom, to speak in public, not just at ceremonies or cultural gatherings, but even in a restaurant in Carnegie, I think is really important, and hopefully we're able to, build more of that capacity as well. So
You mentioned the future. You got to talk about the past too. One of my favorite sayings is that, as you experience life, you gain a lot of foresight. What you see, what you can look ahead and use to guide you at times. And as you get to that destination of future, you develop a lot of hindsight as to what was. You put those together, and they make what I call insight. And the essence of insight, and I wrote this up in a little article at times, the essence of that is wisdom. More importantly, the only way you can get a lot of wisdom is aging, though. So our elders, you made a comment about them, being the ones that are the accurate, are the most, encompassing Kiowa-ness of all Kiowa language. And then you say you want to make sure you do it as accurately as possible. My point to you guys is that one day soon, you're going to be the only ones, not those other ones that taught you, as far as accuracy is concerned. I'm concerned about it, but it changes. Language is dynamic, as we all know, and it changes. One of the things I like to ask y'all is, do you have goals? If you were the almighty director of Kiowa Language in the United States at the tribe, and I came up and said, what is your goal with the Kiowa language in 2024? What is your realistic goal with the Kiowa language? What are some of the quantifiable things you would want to do or have demonstrated to you as far as Kiowa language is concerned? What would your response be to that particular inquiry?
Just to comment on, kind of going off that, the dynamic, I guess how language changes, even the English language changes.
Sure, definitely.
It's not the language that was spoken a couple hundred years ago or 1,000 years ago. I think it's important, as Kiowa people, we seem to, we are traditional people, but we also, there's always this saying, we don't add things and we don't take anything away. But I think we have to have an understanding that change is inevitable. If you think about our Kiowa people, we had to change our way of life, even from migrating from out of Canada into the Yellowstone Mountains and coming to Oklahoma. Huge changes had to be made. The way that we lived, the horse, changed our way of life, so that we can go out on these plains and hunt buffalo and move like we did. I think somehow we've gotten around this idea that we don't want to change things, but with language, it has to change. And even I think I've heard people like elders, even in our songs in Native American church, they've mentioned that. They're just like, that's old language. They don't use those words anymore. We say it this way, but that's an old term. Sometimes they say, I don't even know what that term means, but that's an older language, or maybe we're going to get to this here, but maybe a dialect or variation.
Yeah.
That's what they use that term for. And I think it's important to realize that language is supposed to change. And I think when you talk about accuracy, the Kiowa that will come in the future, maybe it's not going to be the Kiowa that was spoken in 1799 or 1850, 1867, but it'll be our Kiowa language as we identify as Kiowas. So I think that's important to kind of think about, for future people. We need to start thinking of language as dynamic, as you said,
Definitely.
Dr. Bread, that it's going to change, and that's okay. Because I think people get wrapped around the axle like, we shouldn't change things, just like our ceremonies. We shouldn't add things and take anything away. Well, with language, it has to change because we're living in different times, and we're contemporary people. So language has to change along with us.
I have a term I use along that line. It's called contemporary history.
Yeah.
And one of the attributes that we demonstrate a lot of times, in my opinion, is to politicize just about everything that takes place in change.
Yeah.
So I'm careful when I get in behind a pulpit or something like to talk. I want to say, well, how can we address the concept of expansion of the Kiowa language and get away from those political hot words, change. That's when everybody starts putting up their defenses.
Absolutely.
We don't need to change. Well, how can we expand the language? And what are your suggestions? Would that be a part of your goal to expand it? When we start talking about history, contemporary history, there's a lot of changes that have occurred, not in language, but changes brought on by social, different type of phenomena that occurs. You mentioned, back in the old days. The old days to this baby boomers, was relocation. The old days to this baby boomer was Johnson O'Malley. The old days to this was racism. Contemporarily speaking, how the baby boomers feel today, you got to hear a lot more. And I encourage the tribe at times to institutionalize that resource out there called baby boomers for your benefit right now, while they're still alive. Because there is, baby boomers 75 to 80 now. And before you know it, 82, 83, and it's going to be all in your hands. So you better have some goals. You better be able to visualize. You better be able to convey to the common people. And I don't mean that derogatorily, but the common Kiowa person doesn't speak Kiowa. I mean, if you define speaking as being 1 through 10, 8 being, fluent, well, there's a few fluent Kiowas right now, but who's to gauge whether or not their Kiowa's accurate? All the old timers that they learned from are gone now. So, but it's rest in their hands. Let's expand it. Let's have a tendency to talk about it analytically, not so much as who's right and who's wrong. That's what happened with Parker McKenzie's era.
That's
A lot of the old folks fought with one another as to what was the best way or what was the accurate way. And a lot of times I think that inhibited the growth of the Kiowa language, the expansion of it, the clarification of it. So what are some of the obstacles you're encountering right now, inhibiting the language rather than expanding? What are some of the things y'all run into here where the little ones you mentioned, community, Kiowa people were very much family values, big families. They've been splintered up because of things, but community is critical right now, I think, and we're going to have some means of teaching it and learning it, and it's not just going to be in the school, because school isn't favorable to it. It's going to have to be somewhere else and work better than what community we have left right now in this world, in this state. We still have a strong community, but I wonder how much the parents teach their children in the home environment how to speak Kiowa compared to the school where we efforts are. So just some rambling thoughts about today, contemporary history.
So let's go back to your question, Dr. Brett,
Yeah.
about goals. What are your goals?
What would you like to see, ideally?
So when I'm thinking about goals right now, and probably what ultimate goal was when I was younger, I just wanted to be able to speak Kiowa, have a conversation with somebody. And that was the ultimate goal, and it still is for me. I mean, I'm still going to be learning throughout the rest of my life. And so that's what I'm still working on now through our speakers now. When I do speak in Kiowa, am I being understood when I speak Kiowa? That's kind of where I'm looking at. Can they understand me? Is it making any sense? But also among my own peers that are learning Kiowa too, because there are some changes that are happening in there. Sometimes it might be what I would consider a different style of slang than what we'd be talking about when we talk about Kiowa slang, which is when I talk about Kiowa slang in one way, be talking about when I grow up and we use Kiowa words in our English. But that there's another type of slang that's going to be appearing from people who are learning Kiowa more, where we're using different combinations of words to describe things. And that's something that's going to happen naturally through time. I mean, we're going to come up with words. People my age group will begin to start, and younger, or people right now that are learning Kiowa that are older too. We're going to start using words and phrase combinations that we know among each other that are eventually probably going to be the norm at some time or another in the future. So I always like natural language change and what I would consider natural language change versus forcing a word in there, and maybe not everybody can wrap their mind about what you mean by that when you just kind of come up with a word out of nowhere. So it's kind of like trial and error sometimes when you work with words. Am I being understood, or does this work when I say this, or should I do something else? So when I do talk, I think it's kind of important sometimes when it comes to the modern time. Sometimes I will plug in English words in there for now. And when I listen to what's called the Kiowa Cultural Program tapes that they did in the 70s and early 80s, you do hear speakers already doing that. And it does sometimes when you hear them, when they do throw an English word in there, it gives you a little bit more context so you can keep following the Kiowa in there too. So I found that to be pretty useful, but eventually some of those words may turn into Kiowa words later, whether we take the English word and just borrow it straight out and it becomes Kiowanized, or sometimes give you an instance of one that they've used back then. And me and Mr. Granado were talking about it yesterday, and we talked about sometimes when they say get use alma, where there's not really a term for use in a lot of language, but alma means to do. Use in English is use. Get means I'm doing something to it. And so get use alma, I'm using it, whatever it may be. Sometimes that just gets incorporated into the language and you borrow words into it and it just kind of sticks. And I know that for Kiowa, but I believe in other languages that the word we use in English.
English, a great deal.
Yeah. So sometimes that happens, and I have no problem with that either. So we borrow words, or we make new words, or some of them just kind of form out of nowhere. But that goes back to my goal. I mean, trying to get stuff in those different areas to happen, so that we can get through conversations smoothly and that we're relaxed, like we talk about when we're in a relaxed environment, and we can kind of have fun with it.
So I would say definitely a goal, I guess, as far as the language program, would to really see something that definitely kind of reflects the Cherokee Nation. I mean, I think we all know Cherokee Nation is kind of the light on the hill, especially with their language revitalization, and it's interesting to see kind of a desire more for the schools, in which I think one of the goals that I would want to see is a kind of an overhaul of our outreach, of our community, teaching. And I think it really goes back to, which one question you ended up asking as well was kind of problems we run into, and it would be creating necessity for it, or creating need, or creating atmosphere, because just like Cherokee Nation, they have their feeling, the Feeling Center, as well as the Speaker Village just right next to it. I really feel they are developing like Cherokee world, like the atmosphere.
Investing in it.
Yes, like their world building, and I think that's wonderful. And I think that's one thing that we need to do is kind of build a desire in people to want to speak. And I think one thing it kind of can come back to as well is, and this comment would come from a lot of older folks, and for the most part, whenever I was younger, I would disagree with it a lot. And this phrase is, if you don't speak Kiowa, you're not. Yeah. And of course, whenever I was younger, especially being raised around my grandma and whatnot, and hearing some words, I was like, well, of course I'm Kiowa. I'm Kiowa by blood, by tradition, all that, and how I was raised. And I will say it was not until, of course, after my grandma passed away and I started learning more, where as you learn a language, you begin to understand a worldview of those people.
Insight.
Yeah, that insight. And I think that is one thing that's the thing we're missing. It's like, if you were to tell me 4 years ago, you're not Kiowa unless you speak, I'd disagree with you. But as of now, and I remember hearing this from my Bobby Cletus Sepahudo, and I remember getting bawled out.
Slang balled out.
Yeah. And I'm saying, a lot of you walking around saying you're Kiowa, but y'all don't even speak. You're just red, and with a lot of things, you can tie this to salvation as well, but, you at some point, it becomes a responsibility of your own. And I think there needs to, like I said, be that desire. One thing, as well as you asked, is are parents teaching their children? And I'll say, there was a student in the elementary right now. One of the things we were teaching was Basal. So he happened to ask me if I knew who his dad was, and he told me his name. So yeah. So I finally saw the dad, and then I asked him, "Hey, has your boy called you Thaw yet?" He's like, "Yeah, I was wondering who is teaching him." And he's also said that his son had looked at him whenever he walked in and said, "Basal." I said, "Huh? Basal, aren't you Kiowa? Don't you know what that means?" It's coming from his little boy, He was like, "Yeah, I know what that means, but I didn't think you knew it." So even there you have this, age group that's in their, 50s, 40s, 50s, that aren't teaching their young ones, but they know a lot. They heard it, and it's interesting to see kind of a reverse in a way. It's like these little ones are having to tap into the knowledge that their parents have from someone else, though, that's learning. And it's kind of, it is a little bit unfortunate because there should be that help in the household, because it shouldn't just be 45 minutes a day for 5 days in the school. It should be as much as possible, especially with as tonal Kiowa is. Children need to develop an ear for it. And I would say, the biggest thing for that goal would be trying to, really create the necessity for it, for speaking. Because there's also a book, real quick, I just want to mention, called Kiowa Humanity and the Invasion of the State. And there's this interesting picture on it, and my brother was describing to me. And I don't know if this was his own interpretation of it, but you have a classroom, and this is ledger art, but you have a teacher teaching some, you can tell they're Indian kids. And then towards the back of the picture, you see what looks to be just an Indian man, but it's blank. Like the robe is blank, the face is blank. You can probably see like a feather in the hair, but one thing that it was showing is there's no identity in that. Like the Indian's gone, or it's not just the Indian, but what makes us who we are as well, individually as Kiowas, Cheyennes, Arapahoes, Cherokees as well. I think it's starting to creep in with some of the influence of the greater society, and I think that's just one thing we need to fight back against is this. Especially, we live in Carnegie, we live in Anadarko. This is our land. This is, we should be able to speak here and feel comfortable speaking here. And that's why I'm thankful that, we're able to be in the school for those students as well, to see someone in a leadership position at their school and say, there is Kiowa here. I can do this. I can speak. And I think that's just that growing desire is the biggest thing.
I'm going to go ahead and add something to his as he was talking about children coming into the school, and he's starting to see children learning Kiowa a little bit more and the interactions that come from that. So this is my 16th year of teaching Kiowa here, and then before that, 4 years before that, I was just a student here. And I know there was a few of us that came with a Kiowa background that came to school here, including me and Mr. Queton. And he's a. I remember he used a lot of Kiowa when I got here, so I remember I really admired that, because that time I'm introverted, but I definitely talk whenever somebody gives me the floor. And being a teacher, I definitely talk a lot more than I used to. So when I first got here, I was pretty shy and I didn't say too much until I got to know a lot of people. So people who know me really well know that I'll talk a long time. So going back to that, I was watching students that came here and students that came through my classes when I was first teaching in 2007. Now those Kiowa kids, that makes up maybe about one or two students who are Kiowa that take my classes out of 20. A lot of them are non-Kiowa and a lot of them non-Indian. And a lot of times they come from the places and they know a lot of the slangs that we learn. So that's the Englishy Kiowa slang, like when they say bops and when they say sag and thodes and yeah. So that's kind of what it was limited to. But the big change and turnaround now is that some of these students are they're having parents that are some of our teacher trainees for our programs, and some of them that made good attempts at speaking Kiowa to their kids, and now a lot of their kids are going to school here, so they've heard it, and so Kiowa is a little bit more natural to them. Plus, last year I had a student from one of Ramon's after-school programs at Carnegie, and it's probably the first time I had somebody know when the farewells, and there's not that many farewells in Kiowa, but there are a few, and the student at the end of the class on one of the first days said, "Hey, I'm oi bonto." And I've never heard a student come into a class knowing how to say that, which is, "Then I will see you again." I never seen that. And with what everybody's saying in the class, what I'm starting to see is students who have parents who speak a little bit more Kiowa nowadays. And now we're going to have this new set of students that are coming from all these teachers, including Mr. Granado, Mrs. Melody Redbird Post, who everybody knows as Akima, Mrs. Julia Knoll Woodard. And who else is there? Mr. Tim Ankew. So we're gonna start getting students like that here, and that. Yegu. And Tim Yegu. I'm sorry, Mr. Tim Yegu, and we're gonna get a lot of students like that coming through here, and I'm kind of excited to see what that's like, because having people know Kiowa that much coming into our classes, is going to make a huge difference. And I know they're able to help a lot of our students who are learning it for the first time, whether they're non-Indian, non-Kiowa, or just a Kiowa who's never been around it. They really do help with the class, and they really do kind of become teachers on their own when they do those classes.
I wanted to ask Dane a question I know he's got to teach a class here in a little bit. The new orthography, I'd like for you to kind of quickly give us a rundown of how that came about. It's kind of a mixture using Parker McKenzie, and then you were a real integral part of creating this new orthography. I don't want you to go through the whole thing because that would take too long, but talk about that process and the elders you work with to kind of create this new orthography that we're using now for language programming.
Okay, so I'll kind of go into just a short evolution of what happened, and then I think Ramon could actually go even more from what's going on now. So when I first started learning Kiowa, I learned I first actually saw it as Parker McKenzie's his original style when they had the classes at OU in 1992. My parents were studying, and my mom made flashcards, and that's the first time I've ever read it. And as a little 6, 7-year-old, I was kind of picking that up a little bit, picking up a few of the words as they were going through that. Later on in high school, I had the late Alicia Queton Gonzalez as a teacher. So then we had another method that we learned, and I went through there, had that in high school, graduated from high school, came up and had my late grandmother, Carol Boton Willis. And so I had her as a teacher for one semester, and then I had the one who started the language program here, Dr. Gus Palmer Jr., which a lot of people know him as Bishi. I had him for 2 semesters, and up here at OU, I guess you could say, relearned Parker McKenzie's style, and we had the last style that he had before Parker McKenzie passed away. So during that time, I became a teacher, and one of my Grandma Carol's main things that she did is want to teach people how to read. And so we did that in a lot of different places during the time. But I noticed that it was kind of hard to get somebody anew in a 3-time class to get everybody, reading on that level when you're only spending once a week for only 3 weeks. It really didn't stick too often. There was a lot of different reasons for that. So when the grant came around, I proposed 2 different methods. I did over time at OU in my classes, started modifying Parker's method to kind of fit more of a format to where somebody saw it, they can recognize it by seeing it and kind of make out the words. So if they knew Kiowa as a speaker, they might be able to decipher it a little bit more than maybe the original method. So what's called replacement letters in there. I replace replacement letters with replacement letters. So it still stays Parker McKenzie's method. I think that at the very base, it's still his method. Mm-hmm. And all I did was change some stuff that he had already changed multiple times over. And he was always changing his spelling method. He did it through time for the 40s and made a bunch of changes to it, to what made sense on a typewriter at the time. So now we got a lot of other technology, a lot of other symbols. We made it a little bit more readable to people who speak Kiowa or people that are trying to get the sounds for the first time, to make it a little bit more efficient, a little bit faster. So I proposed that, and an alternate phonetic type method too. And what happened to that is the modified version of Parker McKenzie's method got voted on, and the phonetic method ended up getting used in what we use as kind of a online, not really online, but electronic student glossary that got created during the Kiowa Language, Culture, and Revitalization Program, or KLCRP. So that kind of developed from there. But it did take a lot of changes. And even now there's 2 different forms of the modified. Up at OU, I think we use a strike through B, strike through G, strike through D, and at the program, instead of the strike through, there is a bracket used for it. So there's some slightly different versions, but it's all the same thing.
Sure.
I like to teach how I was taught, and I use that as a model for teaching my students when I was here. And one of the first things I would tell them is that you're going to be taught this topic or subject that in a way that you probably haven't been taught before. You have, but this has been formalized. And when he talked about it, I mentioned, when kids hear, they forget. When they see, they remember. But when they do, they understand. So philosophically, that's the approach we used on hands-on learning a lot of times. And I say this because I'm coming to this point for you. One of the concerns I've often had with teaching the languages, and that includes, I taught a couple in Spanish and et cetera, but methodologies. And a lot of them have been oriented towards instructional methods with not as much to be read about their learning style. Mm-hmm. And the theory I brought into the classroom is that our Indian students have been raised a lot of times, and some of them naturally born culturally, where they need to see things rather than hear it. And so our approach was to use field-based experiences in the classes, and we did. We went out a lot of places.
Oh.
Some places our Kiowa Comanche kids went to, they didn't know, they lived there and they didn't even been there before, like down in southwest Oklahoma. So methodologies. Have y'all talked a lot about it, any at all, as far as what type of methods you'll employ, even if the theoretical base, or what was the best way that you think is the best way to teach Kiowa, and in terms of the method, that natural approach, as I call it, a modified approach with a mixture of theory and practice, or your own, like he was talking about, in content. So I don't know. You talked a little bit about it a while ago.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's kind of a mixture of kind of the last two for sure, because this is definitely our first year in the schools, and a little bit with that, not only as a class but even as students individually, you have to figure out how they're learning, and I think that's something each and every one of us teachers are kind of figuring out, especially with language learning. But one thing that I've definitely seen as far as progress goes, because I've done a little bit of the lecture, we're trying to see if that sticks, and it doesn't really. But one thing that I've been able to learn more recently, thanks to Mr. Poolaw, has been hand talk or sign language.
Yeah.
So being able to utilize that a little bit with what we've been learning has really helped out, give them that visual as well. And we've kind of just done a slower pace of things, but with that, we've also been pretty big on what's called comprehensible input, which is kind of just, that can be images or utilizing things that children already understand and plugging a word to it. So if they see a fork, bean song, and that has really helped out a lot. Or if we're talking about a person, utilizing characters from like really famous TV shows, animation or something like that. That way, okay, well, we know we're talking about SpongeBob or whoever, and like a lot of the time there's this absent pronoun for he or she in Kiowa, so kind of to help understand that, I'll explain, I'm not talking about me, we're not talking about us, because we're not SpongeBob or we're not whoever, so we're talking about someone else. So it really helps them understand that a lot. So it's been a mixture of that, a little bit of storytelling, and the other thing has been hymn singing or hymn practice, mostly for language fair, but also too just for us to learn, as well as part of that cultural item. But even with that, getting to see where they're understanding that these hymns really are prayers in song form, and prayers are just talking to God. And so easily being able to tell them, like, you can remove this specific line, out of this hymn, and you can use it as a command of something. Or if you wanted to pray, you can take this line out of a hymn and use it in a prayer.
Is there, to your knowledge, your understanding, is there a Kiowa way of teaching Kiowa? And that, I'm not quizzing, I'm just kind of opening up a topic that you can explore a little bit more. Do you believe there's a Kiowa way of teaching Kiowa rather than a public school way of teaching Kiowa?
Oh, absolutely. I think for the most part, this is kind of one thing that I've talked about a little bit, is that there seems to be, like I said, that a slight over-reliance on the school. And traditionally, how it's been, you brought up in the home, in it.
Culture,
yeah.
Home culture.
And I do understand, from with certain families, with certain individuals, some chose to not teach that on to their kids. And, even I'll say with my my grandparents, that was something that they didn't really speak that much to their children on. And I think even though that is a situation, we still have a time where we're able to, and it's really complicated with how you said there's so many things in life that are kind of pulling us here and there, where it's really hard for us to get to focus on that language learning. But I would say the Kiowa way of learning for the longest time was always in the home. And I think that's, for what y'all was saying earlier about us not liking a lot of change, I think it goes back to just how much had changed in such a short amount of time.
Sure.
With Indians in general.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of, even in my time, I've seen things. It's kind of like a fear,
Yeah.
I want to remember. Yeah. I want to remember how it was. So, but knowing that, things are changing a bit, I really think it should kind of go back towards that, though. If we can, like I said, going back to that goal, building that desire where we're able to create opportunities outside of the classroom, then we can see where it's being used in the home even more so, and that can get into that teaching.
Well, Ramon, it's good to hear that we have Kiowa being taught, to our youth. What's their response been? Are they being engaged in Kiowa language learning? And has technology played a part in their learning? And, how would you suggest we use technology to teach language moving forward? Because you're right, tribes like Cherokee Nation, Choctaw Nation, they have apps on their phone. And this day and age, my nephews and my niece, they know how to use a phone better than I do. It seems to be their one platform they consistently are using.
Oh.
So has technology, how is that going to play a factor in language learning in the future?
So I definitely feel like I'm kind of in the middle on this a lot of the times. But Carnegie actually has a technology grant from K20, I believe. So they've really been encouraging us to utilize technology, giving us access to certain tools to use. And one thing I think that would be is kind of really neat to see, there's the mobile video submission actually for the language fair. And there's that iMovie on the iPhone, and kids can be able to learn their language and make these videos, where these videos can show some sort of teaching, like this, here's a makeup tutorial, or here's us talking about my dog, or talking about my day, or whatever. And there's that comprehensible input. They're getting to see what's going on and understand through the imagery, that message is being understood. So with that, of course, one popular thing is kind of like, I use Quizzes, but another Kahoot or something like that.
Okay.
Utilizing games where they get to be on their phone and they get to
Sure.
read in Kiowa what the question is, and try to answer as fast as possible. There's also things where a lot of it is utilizing just imagery from what we can pull up on the internet to use that comprehensible input, kind of a little bit of immersion, saying, Togul Da is a young man. And I would say moving forward, I would definitely love to see some apps like that. One thing that's very immersive, and hopefully we're able to use it more. But at the same time, just with a lot of things, especially the over reliance on technology, I have a slight. I don't know fully about it, because I feel in a way it changes who we are as Indians. We kind of become more, rather than family oriented or group oriented as a tribe, it seems with the greater society, with phones and social media and whatnot, it's kind of being more individualized. We need to visit with people, not just be on our phones. But I would say that's definitely been a big helpful thing with that K20 grant, getting to use kind of like smart boards or Optima TV sets, and just being able to use all those resources to convey ideas. Because for the most part, we do have things at the language program, but a lot of them are handouts and kind of just materials right there,
Resources.
just word form. Yeah. So it's been very helpful, technology, to convey those ideas.
Now, back to the beginning point, what I was talking about, why I asked the questions of y'all in terms of we need some more qualified leadership, not teaching, but advocation and promotion of the Kiowa language. And we need to have some orientation, I think, in the research that's been done in languages, more so, especially among the teachers. I mean, pedagogy is a place that you'll need to go. And if they're not there, you got a lot of people who haven't had any training in the area of methodology and learning theories and styles of teaching relevant to the most effective means of teaching a kid who learns a different way.
Yeah.
So we've been in ourselves as Native people, had it imposed on us. The Kiowa style, the Kiowa way, he had some ways, as you mentioned, which I understood as being part of the Kiowa way. That's something people don't understand. And one of the goals I think the tribe needs to have is to explain it in context to its people, and then come out with some creativity about how to approach it. The big word is how. Not why as much, but how do we do this? And I think there's some creative ways that incorporates technology, theories, blah, 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 that have not been addressed because a lot of the people that are involved with it haven't had the training for it. And it says they know Kiowa language, how you go about teaching it. There are some people that had done a great job of it. So I kind of bring this around in the circle. That was my goal coming here today is to talk about what can the tribe do instead of the public schools. What can the tribe do to institutionalize the teaching of the culture, using language, using music. I learned a lot of my Kiowa by singing. I started challenge y'all today with that, with all due respect. They sing me a song in Kiowa that you know. Nothing fancy, just a little song. I know Warren, I've heard him sing, so I know. I haven't heard,
Dane.
Yeah, Dane, yourself. But sometimes old Kiowa ways show me, tell me, show me that before I let you go, I would say I want to make sure that you know what you're doing. So therefore, part of my goal is you demonstrate to me that you understand what we're talking about. I'm not saying you do that. That's style of teaching though, so that when you demonstrate and we all say, so on, whatever, we know we can send you, we can sanction you and say you're a conveyor. And that's one of the things I like to see the tribe try to get into. I don't know any comments you have to what I've said a few times, but that's my circle right now today with y'all.
Definitely how you were saying, a lot of the Kiowa that you learn is through singing. And one thing that I always hear from Piho Gemma or Dolores Harrigera is that it is not only is it good to sing, but those hymns help you learn. They're slower. You get to understand, because back what I said, it's really just prayers, just in song form. And she's always stressed that every time I've been around her where I've been able to sing. She's always said, it's always, that's the best way to learn your language is singing hymns. And she always says as well, there will come a time where you can't sing anymore. So sing while you can. And I think, and Kiowas have always been a singing people, always. And I think definitely that's that would also be a Kiowa way of learning, is through that singing.
Absolutely.
So that would be a comment that I'd have.
Thank you, Ramon. I think and thank you, Dr. Brad.
You're welcome.
And thank you to Dane Poolaw for being with us today. It's been a really enlightening discussion. I think we could sit here for 3 or 4 more hours. But our listeners are listening to this podcast episode of Thongia. They are undoubtedly more informed about the ongoings of the Kiowa language, and hopefully people are inspired by the work that's being done currently. So we want to wish you the best of luck in all your language endeavors. And it's critical. It's critical to our identity as Kiowa people, and I think that's critical to our sovereignty, because the people, you can't have a tribe or a nation without its people. And, there are a lot of different layers you could look at sovereignty from, but I think language is a big part of that. And to our listeners for tuning in, we invite them to stick with us for more episodes that shed light on the beauty of our Kiowa people and the challenges that are laid out before us, especially when it comes to language preservation for we as Kiowa people. So we want to say, Hego im oi bon ta, Hego im oi don tai ta. We will talk to you next time. Thank you. Deon de aho for tuning in to this episode of Thongya, our District 7 podcast. The music was provided by Mr. Terry Tsotai. For more information on our legislative work, please visit our website, kiowatribe.org/district-7. Thank you all for tuning in. Hego im oi don't I.